Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to have a little bit of a change of pace now. I'm not going to be getting up and walking, and we're going to focus a bit more on data and graphs and charts. So there might not be quite as many laughs in the next 20 minutes as there have been in the last. One of the things I did want to pick up on, actually, that I thought was really interesting from Matt's talk was that whole thing around doing social, because we see this in our data. I've not got any charts on it in my presentation, but I just think it was a really interesting insight from Matt, and that is that whole point of, if you want to engage in social, which you should all be doing, you need to engage in it. If you just post jobs out to social media channels, it's a really ineffective way of generating traffic, generating response, generating interest. If you engage with that audience, if you give them interesting content, and it doesn't always have to be kind of the sort of super fun and interesting stuff, but just give them relevant information and content, then all of a sudden social media becomes really effective as a channel for your advertising. And we have clients at Broadbean who will literally get as much as 50–60% of all of their applications through from social media. We have other people that literally just dump everything on social media and they get nothing. So I thought that was a really interesting insight from Matt. So on Monday, we are launching the fourth of our annual recruitment trends reports. We've been doing this now for the last 4 years. And it's basically a review of everything that we saw happening in 2014, hopefully to give you some insights on what is likely to happen going forward in 2015. It's coming out on Monday. You'll be able to get the report from the website. There's a resources section. And what I'm going to do today is just canter through some of the headlines of those reports. And if you want to dive into individual industries or individual trends, then you can do that by downloading the report. My version of the pitch, just to give you a bit of context for why we think we're well placed to talk about data. We have a huge amount of it. So Broadbean, as hopefully most of you know, originally was a job distribution tool. That's still the core of our business. Our clients post jobs out to the job boards, out to social media by using our software to do that. And we now post in excess of 3 million adverts every single month. And in response to those 3 million adverts, we see around 10 million candidate applications coming back through the system. So we have a really good feel for what is happening in the recruitment industry, who is posting what, which industries are performing better or worse, and where the applications are coming from. We also have clients now carrying out as much as 2.5 to 3 million candidate searches every month, and all of this activity is carried out across over 100,000 users in 180 countries around the world. So we have a lot of data and hopefully some decent insight. It's been a big year for us at Broadbean. Back in April, we were acquired by CareerBuilder. So on April the 1st, we announced to the world that we'd been acquired by CareerBuilder. A few people thought it was an April Fool. It wasn't. And for us, it's been a really exciting year because they come to our business with some really interesting technology. So for those of you that are our clients, 2015, we'll be releasing some interesting things for you to use to hopefully get more value from our tool. And CareerBuilder have been a great addition to our family. Anyone engaged in recruitment, as you all are, anyone that is keeps up with the news will be aware that Britain is hiring. We're seeing job vacancies at the highest levels, higher levels than we've seen for over 15 years. So there are real positive trends in the recruitment industry. But most of you are recruiting in-house. And one of the other things Matt mentioned was that he doesn't see the war for talent. But actually, if you look at the headlines, if you look at what people are talking about, companies are finding it harder to find good people. We see it at Broadbean. We are finding it more difficult. 3 years ago, we've been hiring through the recession. 3 years ago, we could pretty much take our pick of anyone we wanted. It's proving more difficult. There definitely is an element of challenge in finding good people now that wasn't there 2 years ago. The bit that hasn't changed over the last 12 months, as far as we can see, and the headlines would support it, is there hasn't really been a massive development in wage inflation. So whilst real-term wages are increasing slightly, that's mainly because inflation is so low, and therefore any increase in wages leads to a slightly increased kind of standard of living. The actual increase in wages in real terms hasn't really started to happen yet, or at least we haven't seen it. So for the last 4 years when we've been running these reports, what we've seen is every year there's been a debate about whether we're coming out of a recession or not. Are we in recovery? Are we not in recovery? 2013 was the first year where we thought we saw a real positive sign across most of the industry that we were coming out of it. That 5.5% increase we saw in 2013 in the number of job vacancies that we posted when normalised against previous years. But in 2014, I think the debate has to be over. What you'll see is politicians now debating about what kind of jobs those are. Are they 0 hours contracts versus kind of real-time full employment? But an 18.4% increase in job vacancies year on year is substantial, and I think it's hard to argue that that isn't the start of a real recovery in the economy. There are sectors where that's not happening. There are sectors like oil and gas which are going through a lot of trauma at the moment, but as a whole, as the economy, we're definitely seeing positive movement in that area. And this is the bit where I think that I think is particularly interesting about the market, the recruitment market we're actually operating in at the moment. So as well as seeing job vacancies, we see applications. And what we saw in 2014 is that the number of applications to those adverts did increase. So there was about a 15% increase year on year in applications. But the applications per vacancy, so every advert that is posted out to the job boards, to social media, every one of those applications was seeing less response than they were seeing in the previous year. The first half of the year, it actually wasn't too stark, and so the overall number is only down 2.4%. But the second half of the year, we really saw a dramatic fall from around 27 responses to every advert that's posted out, right the way down to 21 at the end of the year. And our data already shows in 2015 that trend's continuing. So you are going to have to get scrappier, I think, in the way you recruit. You're going to have to become cleverer at the way you recruit. You're going to have to advertise the job better. As Matt said, job adverts is content. So many people don't think about the content of their adverts when they post them. I think you're going to need to get scrappier because it is going to get harder to find good people, and more of the market is hiring, and therefore you're going to be under more competition all of the time. Salary levels, as I mentioned before, we didn't see any increase at all year on year in the average advertised salaries from across our business. So actually we saw a 0.5% decrease in the average advertised salary 2014 versus 2013. Again, that is skewed a little bit. The second half of the year there was some kind of recovery, but it was small. So the first half was quite a substantial fall. The second half was a small increase in the salaries that were being advertised. And you would expect, when you take the previous chart and the falling APV rates, you would expect to see that translate in 2015 to an increasing salary level. You're going to have to compete more for talent. You're going to have to compete more to get people through the door, and it's likely that that's going to drive salaries up. Too early in 2015 to say whether we're seeing that, but we would certainly expect to see that happening based on the other trends. As a business, when people advertise roles within the Broadbean system, they assign those roles to an industry. And we have 48 industries within the business that we track and monitor. And in 2014, 41 of those 48 sectors showed growth. So that means almost every person in this room, the sectors and markets you operate in, you are probably hiring, but so are your competition. In 2013, when we looked at this, that was only 30 showing growth. So when we were a bit unsure in 2013 about whether it really was a recovery or not, it's because a third of the sectors were still showing declines. So it's hard to argue that it was broadly based, whereas now the vast bulk of the sectors are showing recovery, and it's hard to argue that's not a broad-based recovery. There's a really big skew, though, towards dropping application per vacancy rates, and again, it's not quite as one-sided as the previous slide, but 31 of the 48 sectors are finding it harder to hire people. There is more competition for the resource that's out there. There's more competition for you in getting the good people through the door. And again, in the second half of the year, if I'd only done this for half two, that would have been up towards the 40 number again. So almost all sectors are showing that they're getting less people through the door for their adverts. Pay, as I talked about before, there's no clear picture. As many sectors pretty much are seeing falling pay rates as increasing pay rates. Some of that will be structural, some of that will be industries that are hiring more junior people, and some of that will be genuinely sort of downward pressure on salaries. In terms of which sectors are experiencing what kind of trends, from a job posting perspective, from a volume perspective, these are the top 5 sectors that we saw in terms of growth in 2014. I don't think it's any big surprise to see building and construction or logistics at the top of these charts. It's an infrastructure-led recovery largely. There's been investment in construction and infrastructure almost throughout the period. And as you really start to come into recovery, that accelerates, and I think you'd expect to see those at the top. Admin and call centre, admin, secretarial, call centre, customer support. Again, I think those are sectors that underpin any growth. You tend to be able to hold off the more junior hires when things are bad. You keep the key assets in the business. Once recovery starts to come through, you need to hire those people into the business. And a lot of those people support growth and support businesses. So probably not a massive surprise to see those doing well. Education and training surprised me when we ran these reports. The public sector is still supposed to be pulling back and not recruiting. But I think what you probably see there is we've had 4 years of not recruiting, and then you get to a point where actually you have to hire. There's also increasing move towards academies and non-public sector education, and that's probably playing into those numbers as well. The sector with the 6th highest growth in terms of recruitment in 2014 was recruitment. And for our business, that's both recruitment agencies, recruitment companies, and also in-house recruitment. So we see that across both of those businesses. So the 6th highest sector was the sector that we all operate in. In terms of those that have performed worse, again, not surprising that the relative declines are much smaller than the relative increases on the previous slide. So even the sectors that aren't doing well are not doing as badly as those doing well are doing well. I think this is much harder to draw conclusions from than the previous slide. And I think where we see decreases here, I think it's structural rather than actual decreasing performance in these sectors. So travel and tourism and retail, I think that's a lot to do with the fact that those markets are moving away from bricks and mortar and they're moving into online businesses. And I think you need a different mix of people when you move away from bricks and mortar. You need less volume, and I think there's less hiring happening in those sectors because of that shift. And I think in terms of new media and internet and senior appointments, I think that's a structural move away from just job advertising, job posting. I think new media and internet, I think that's absolutely the sector where some of the more interesting, innovative forms of recruitment are happening. And I think less people are reliant maybe on job posting than they were. I think in senior appointments, again, there's more of a move back to headhunting, maybe a move towards LinkedIn. Less people are advertising those roles, and again, I think that's probably structural. In terms of the pay rates that we're seeing, 4 of these 5, the numbers 2 to 5, are all sectors that are hiring in very high volumes. So not all of those were on the top 5 sectors, but they're all sectors that are growing rapidly. So they're hiring aggressively, and that is apparently flowing through into pay scales. What's interesting is travel and tourism was on the previous chart as the second worst sector for recruitment. Actually is showing the highest rates of pay increases from across the business. And again, I think that points to structural changes. I think it's different role types rather than supply and demand leading to any changes. In terms of the worst sectors for pay growth, interesting again that recruitment is the worst. So we're not seeing pay increases at all in the recruitment sector. In fact, we're seeing those go down, and we're seeing them go down higher than anywhere else. But I think that if you look at the bottom 3 on that chart, they're all service-led industries, and I'm pretty sure they're all industries where through the downturn we haven't hired junior people into our businesses. We've tended to keep the best people in the businesses, and then as soon as things pick up, you have to hire in at the more junior levels. So I think in recruitment that's definitely true. I think in consultancy and legal, I think you're seeing a lot of graduate recruitment return, and I think that's playing through into decreasing salary rates. Given that we've got a room full of people who wouldn't necessarily consider yourselves being in the recruitment industry as such, but you all touch on recruitment, I just thought it was worth diving into the detail a little bit in terms of what we see happening in recruitment. And we've touched on some of this already, so I'm going to just canter through this fairly quickly. The previous years when we've looked at the data, we haven't seen any great recovery in recruitment volumes in terms of hiring. We have absolutely seen that in 2014. So a 33% increase year on year in hires in recruitment in the recruitment sector. That supply and demand dynamic that I mentioned earlier on in relation to application per vacancy rates, recruitment has an even starker decline than the market as a whole. So the market as a whole saw a 2.4% decrease in application per vacancy rates. Recruitment has seen an 18% fall year on year. So it is getting harder to hire good people into recruitment businesses. I don't know whether that's affecting people here today, but if it's not, it's something that you should probably be looking out for when you're looking to build your teams and build your businesses out. And again, I've touched on this already, so I'm not going to talk about this for too long. What you can see here is there is no upward increase in what we're seeing in terms of average advertised salaries. The rate fell by 8% last year. It didn't show any growth the previous year either. There is no upward movement in that data within our business, so we don't see any change there at the moment. It's going down, but again, I think that's to do with the kind of people we're hiring rather than any underlying issues. And that is really it. I just wanted to kind of canter through some of the headlines that we see. If you do want to download the report, then please go to the website. You can go into any of your individual industries, and we look at a huge amount of data for every sector and every industry. You can see what's happening in salaries, what's happening in the different key metrics around job volumes, application volumes, but we also analyse the different mix of where those jobs are being advertised within your sector. So we break that down by salary levels, so you can actually go in and see what we see from within our business in that area. So that's it for me. Thank you very much. If anyone's got any questions, then I'm more than happy to try and answer them for you.